So, welcome, sir, to AIMST, Amity Institute of Marine Science and Technology, Uttar Pradesh, Noida. So, today's lecture is all about EIA, Environmental Impact Assessment for Sustainable Habitat Management, by Dr. B. A.K. Prusty, Associate Professor and Head of Department of Natural Resources and Management, Calicut University. So let me first introduce Dr. Prusty to all the students and faculty members and all. So Dr. Prusty has joined as a junior scientist in July 2007 to Gujarat Institute of Desert Ecology. So he joined as a scientist in Salim Ali Center for Ornithology and Natural History. Then he joined as senior scientist in the Gujarat Institute of Desert Ecology as in Environmental Impact Assessment Division. And now from June 2018, he is continuing as associate professor and head in Calicut University. So sir has many achievements in his career, so you can better grab many kind of knowledge from him. So he is the editor of many scientific journals. He has educate many PhD students, MSc students, and also he has many kind of research interest like environmental impact assessment, wetlands, environmental contamination, human and wildlife health, ecological studies of birds with integrated of ecotoxicological aspects, then river basin studies and mining and geohydrology. So you can it will be on grasping knowledge ocean of knowledge, I can say, on wetlands or on habitats or ecological aspect or biodiversity aspect to our students. So with this, I'm welcoming Dr. A.K. Prusty sir, and now I'm just introduce you to our HY sir, Dr. Ashutosh Srivastava sir. So he's heading now. So over to you, sir, for your opening remarks.
Dr. Pruthi, welcome to AIMST, and it will be nice that now a student will get knowledge about EIA. Theoretically, they know that what is EIA and how it will be done. But person who done a lot of project in this area and getting your experience, which will not be mentioned in some textbooks, that will be a real experience for our student, and that will give a lot of learning to our student. So I'm sure that this session will be very useful for all of them, and they can have the new new knowledge, new where they can find the scope for their training placement and the jobs in the future. Moreover, if they want to start their own business, then also they need to think about the EIA before starting any commercial activity. They need to do this EIA. So knowing from you who really have the field experience, that will be great thing for our students. So thank you so much for accepting our invitation. So now over to you.
Yeah, thank you, Dr. Srivastav. And yeah, Sophia has been really instrumental pushing up this. I mean, she has been communicating with me for a couple of weeks now. Yeah, finally, so we are all together virtually in one platform, and I'm more than happy to deliberate on something which is very close to my heart, and I always love to discuss the concepts. And I really appreciate, the foresightedness which Dr. Ashutosh has, postulated, how the students should get, future endeavors in the said field. However, sir, what I'm planning now is, I don't know how, what is the composition of the, audience. I had a brief talk with Dr. Sophia. Accordingly, this being the first lecture, I have tried to make it little more generalized, such a sort of a gateway to the ocean of the domain on EIA. And yes, specifically, if further interest there with students, we can have further sessions as well. There is no issues in it, because it may not be possible for me to deliberate on all the technical aspects of EIA. in a short span of an hour or so. So maybe I will start the lecture given a permission now, and I'm still having some technical glitches in my laptop, so I'm just trying to settle it, and I will start the screen sharing. I had started the screen sharing and it got disconnected in between. So just please bear with me for a couple of a few minutes. Yeah, I think I'm there. I'm there. Yes.
Sure.
Open
Sure.
the share screen. Yeah. Window. Application. Please do let me know if the screen is visible. The so I can
Yes, sir, visible.
start what. Yeah. So can we go ahead?
Yes, sir.
Yes, sir, yes, sir.
Yeah. Thank you. Is the first slide visible to all of you?
Yes, sir. Yes, sir.
Okay. Yeah. So let us start with what I have thought of deliberating today. That is on environmental impact assessment, and of course the term assessment itself, drives all of us crazy. As what are we going to assess, and what sort of impact we are going to assess? So it's not simply about assessing the impact, but it's rather providing an input and providing insights for a better habitat management, habitat conservation, and with an overall aim of achieving sustainability. That is what I wanted to deliberate today in the session. So I would start with a famous quote by Martin Luther King, which basically perhaps all of us have understood it, but we never think about it. Is that the means by which we live really outdistance the which. So eventually, scientific power and at the we have been
Sir, your voice is breaking.
and hello, hello.
Sir, yes.
Yes, sir, yes, sir.
Yeah. Thank you. So how the human civilization has started. Go back to a geological time scale of maybe somewhere around 10,000 years ago, when the modern humans came into Earth. We all started with a society called hunter-gatherer society, and gradually we have been, revolutionizing our own behavior and attitude with nature towards agricultural society, and then started to industrialized society. So we started living in nature, and then progressively we have started with nature, started living with nature, going on, and then now we are in industrial society living over nature. This is just a theoretical conceptual framework to explain the scale of environmental impact, the scale of ecological impact activities are going to have on the biosphere. So that is how, being a merely just a biological species like Homo sapiens, we have been becoming a commanding force in the whole biosphere. And that is where it all comes, like what is the optimum scale of resource utilization. Becoming a commanding force, we have been very, very successful in enhancing the scale of resource use. So without realizing the impact, we have actually crossed the limit, and we have started exploiting resources. So that's where, uh, approaching the tipping point, and in some arena we have already crossed the tipping point. And in common parlance, if we look at recent estimates, the impact we have, existing human population on Earth we actually so one planet Earth is not sufficient enough to support the required resources for the human population the planet has. And yes, to have a more quantitative information, how ecological footprints are measured, like where do we stand? Maybe somewhere the Indians, we have a moderate ecological footprint compared to other continents in the globe, other countries in the globe. So we consider United States citizen one baby as a unit, and then we can make it like the kind of resource consumed by one baby in United States and the kind of ecological footprint, the resource impact, ecological impact that is generated by one US baby is equivalent to 35 Indian babies. So that is the kind of impact, the disparity we have. And this is where it is evident the kind of disparity we have is what do you call actually a development? Is this the development that we have been aiming for? Or really there can be a balanced approach to development. There can be a sustainable approach to development. So what is essential? Is this continuing form of development essential or projects? Now, development projects,
Excuse me.
there are certain specific questions. One, yeah,
Excuse me, sir. Sir, your screen is not visible right now.
okay. It's not visible.
Yeah, it's
Which
not.
all
So,
slides you have seen through? Only background, or after some slides you have been able to see?
so Deepti or any students? So what about you? So are you seeing the screen?
Only. It's the last slide only.
No, ma'am.
No, ma'am. And we only saw the first slide. I think I only saw the first slide and then it changed.
Somebody has seen the first slide and somebody has seen the last slide. I really don't know where the issue is. I think, and the voice is clear?
And now
Dr.
voice.
Sophia,
Voice is clear, sir. Sir, clear,
Okay.
sir.
Sir, can you just do one thing? Sir, can you just give me your slide? I can like upload from here.
Yeah,
It will
I
be
can
easy
do
for you.
that. I can do that. I can do that. I have absolutely no issues. Just a moment. I'll do that. Right away, I will send it to you. If that
So
helps,
you
then
can
I'll do that.
communicate in that.
No, no, now itself, should I email to you? You
Yeah,
can
yeah, you can
present
email.
it or
Yes, I can present to you.
yeah, just bear with me. Am I audible now?
Yes, sir, you are audible.
Okay. Uh, how about the screen sharing? Is the slides still rolling or not yet?
So I am not able to see. So I think many of them are able to see.
Slide not visible.
Okay, Dr. Sophia, I'm doing one thing. Then I just shifted the internet connectivity, but if it is not helping, I'm sending you the slides. Just bear with me. I'll just send you the
No
slides.
issues.
So I think this is all issues with our high-end technology. So the audience now you have in the forum are all postgraduate students?
No, sir.
Um,
There are postgraduate and graduate students.
Okay, in marine science.
Yes.
yes, sir.
Uh-huh. Okay, great, great. I'm just attaching the slide. I thought I'll just get engaged instead of waiting the file to get attached. And is EIA and core paper you have, core or elective or something?
So Rama, Dipti, you can answer.
The AIA is no, we don't
So
have.
it was there in your last semester.
Okay.
Mm-hmm.
But now in the students
No,
having in BSc sixth semester, they are also having one, but not with the major elective or something. So
Okay. Mm-hmm. Okay.
they are having a only portion.
Okay.
as minor.
Right. You can check your mailbox.
Yes, sir.
Should I make one last attempt by the time you are downloading?
Yes, sir.
If it helps, yes. The time is the most precious resource for an ecologist. So let us make. No, still I'm not able to. You can share that.
Yes, sir. Uh, Still, I haven't got the mail.
Oh, is it so?
So, but you can still go on with the talks, like
Yeah. Okay.
the slide is just
Okay. That is a good idea. In fact. Uh, So what we have discussed is like how human civilization has been, very strategically and evolutionary way exerting pressures which we otherwise call as ecological impacts and measured quantitatively in the form of ecological footprints. And when we come to the development part, a question which often comes to mind is the kind of or the form of development that is being practiced now. Is it really essential? If it is not essential, what are the relevant issues? If it is essential also, what are the relevant issues? So the relevant issues that one needs to understand is what is development, the type of development, and is there any alternative to the to achieve development, and are the projects really sustainable? Because when we talk about development and development projects, it is cutting across different habitats. It is neither terrestrial nor marine, or only terrestrial or marine, or it is both, right? So any developmental project, it can come up in a terrestrial area, it can come up in a marine ecosystem, or it can come up any aquatic ecosystem which requires direct waterfront areas. So in that case, one thing we need to understand is what is the kind of technology that we are opting for, right? To ensure that the proposed development is going to have a minimal impact on the ecology or the ecosystem, and can there be better technology with less pressure on the environment? And So what is the level of safety for public well-being? That has to be discussed in detail. So what happens is who will provide the protection, the safeguard to the environment, and can we really rely on the authorities in the matter of safeguarding environment? That is what precisely always we deliberate in EIS. And what is the minimal level of safety and protection, environmental safeguard, that is essential. So what happens usually, such kind of questions are rarely discussed or rarely raised. Forget about discussing, it is not even raised in many forums. And that is where the concept of EIA, environmental impact assessment, that becomes, very helpful in becoming a decision making tool, because EIA does help in streamlining all our development projects and rather showing us a path as how do we carry out a project activity so that the activity is likely to have minimal environmental impact. That is what is usually the aim in case of EIS. And it can come up in, yes. So Dr. Sophia, are you presenting now?
Yeah. Yes, sir.
Yeah, go ahead. Share the screen, please.
Yes, sir. I have shared.
Next.
Yes, sir. So, sir, is it okay? So, I'll be changing it. Am I audible, sir?
Ma'am, you are audible, but sir is not audible.
Sir? I think ecological footprints. Hello? Sir, you are not audible. So, sorry for the inconvenience. Just wait for 1 or 2 minutes. He is again connecting.
Yes,
As you
ma'am, no
know,
problem.
as you know, the area is like in a remote location near to the sea. So there are lots of this kind of things happen sometimes. Hello, sir. Sir, you are muted.
Yes, am I audible?
Yes, sir. Yes, sir.
So
Sir,
you are all
sir,
fortunate. You are, you are all fortunate to be in the NCR. We are not in NCR, in a remote corner of the country in southern Odisha. So that is where the technical glitches. Yeah, no issues.
but sir,
So
we
can we
are
continue?
staying at the nature itself.
Yeah, yeah, yeah. Our campus is far off from the main city actually.
Yes,
So
that's what I'm saying to
yeah,
students.
yeah, it's in a village setup, so network connection is really not strong. Yeah, can we continue?
So, sir, just see the slides. Which slide I'll be showing?
Ecological footprint, you can still continue. Yeah, I have discussed.
Okay.
Yes, go ahead. Yeah, next, next, next. We have discussed this also. Yes, next, next, next. Yeah, I was just talking now. Yeah, next slide. Yes, great, great. So what happens really is, no, the previous one.
Okay, sir.
Yes. So basically, my idea was to talk about the generalized concept on the development and developmental projects and what is essential, what form of development has to be accommodated, and since it is Shakti, yeah. So since we have resolved to discuss about marine environment, it is the projects. Am I audible? Hello.
Yes, sir, you are
Yes,
audible.
sir.
Am I audible?
Yes, sir. Yes, sir.
Yeah. So, projects which require direct waterfront areas, projects which can be planned in marine environment and coastal environments as well, and then the habitats that are generally getting susceptible to such developmental projects can be the areas or habitats which have specific, ecological values, ecological sensitivity, and then vulnerability.
Sir, you are not audible right now. Hello, sir. Sir, you are not audible right now. So we can wait another 1 minute. So let sir join again. Hello, sir. Sir, you're muted. Yes, sir. Yes, sir. Now we can hear you.
Yeah, so am I audible?
Yes, sir. You're audible.
Okay, so what I was talking about is the kind of marine habitats that these developmental projects are generally planned at is having specific ecological values. They have specific, ecological sensitivity and a specific level of vulnerability to different ecological processes and anthropogenic impacts and erosion related issues. So that is where the EIA helps in, identifying a suitable site uh, for a proposed developmental projects, or even prescribing specific guidelines as what kind of projects should come up in what kind of habitat and so on. So kind of habitat that are usually compromised or that are usually made open to developmental projects are like mudflats, we have mangroves, we have intertidal areas, and so on. Yeah, next slide, please. Yes. So what it happens is basically it's a very powerful environmental safeguard in project planning. That is the view from a researcher. Being a researcher in EIA, I can say this, but many people do not agree to it, and they disagree with it, and they have specific perception. So there is a public perception in EIA, which I will be talking in the subsequent slides. What does it do? In fact, the EIA, it predicts the effect of a proposed activity, impact of a proposed activity or project on the environment. Number two, it compares various alternatives available for a project, alternative in the form of site alternative or alternative in the form of technological alternative. So we can suggest that whether the site is not suitable for this project, we can think of another site, or the technology what is being used in that particular project is not proper, we can have a better and robust technology to have a minimal environmental impact, and then identify a best combination of economic, social cost and benefits and so on. Next, please. Yes. So in fact, we have discussed already about the EIA. It predicts the likely environmental impact. It finds way to reduce unacceptable impacts. Yes, and it helps in shaping up the project so that it suits to the local environment. Always you have to keep something in mind that the project where it is being planned or proposed, what is the environmental scenario in that particular place, and it presents the predictions and options to the decision makers. So decision makers do take a decision as to whether to allow the project at that particular place or not allow. Next, please. Yeah, go ahead. There are animations. So the journey of EIA, basically it started, no. Yeah, previous slide. Basically it started way back in 1982, and it got aggressive, especially after this thing, the Bhopal gas disaster in 1984. So the whole country became really serious about a need for a proper environmental, mechanism for proper environmental safeguard. And the EIA journey was, in 1994 when it started as a environmental, it was notified as EIA notification with a list of 29 industries, and later it became 32 and 34 and so on. So after 12 amendments at the end of 2006, it got really amended, and the amended notification was again revised notification was notified in 2006, and now we are following the 2006 notification. Next, please. So depending on the extent of assessment it involves and the duration, EIA is basically categorized into three types: preliminary EIA, rapid EIA, and comprehensive EIA. Preliminary EIA is something a very preliminary scale assessment which is for a duration of 1 month or so. Basically, desk job and reviewing the existing scenario depending on different sorts of material. And rapid EIA for a duration of 3 months or so. That means one season complete data we have to generate from the field. And then the comprehensive EIA is for particular 1 year. So which spreads across different seasons, which is experienced in a particular area of our interest or where the project is being planned. Next, please. Yeah. So preliminary EIA involves basically, the impacts to be studied in detail and parameters to be studied. So it is basically making a checklist of impacts to be and parameters to be studied before the project implementation. Next. Rapid EIA and comprehensive EIA, the nomenclature is just shifted. I don't know how it is. Basically, rapid EIA is for 3 months and comprehensive EIA is for 15 months. In both the cases, rapid EIA, it will be one season data collection with all baseline data, and in comprehensive EIA, it is basically 1 year data collection. So we usually consider it as 15 months. Because 1 complete year plus 3 more months for compiling and predicting the impact and all that type of things. Next, please. Yeah. What are the steps? Is like the first step is scoping. We have to identify the significant impacts, establish the geographical scope of analysis, establish time, identify other actions affecting the resources, ecosystem, community. Community need not be only human community, it can be wildlife community and so on. Next, please. Describing the affected environment. Yes, we have to characterize the available resources, ecosystems, human community, and what are the impacts likely to happen. That is what is the next step. And in this process, we are supposed to characterize the stress that is likely to be imposed on the ecosystem and quantify them also following standard methodology. Next, please. So since we will a best inventory assessment is highly essential. Identifying the impacts and the relationship between the proposed activity and the receptor. Receptor is the environment where the project is being planned. That has to be determined. And the magnitude and significance of the cumulative effect has to be studied on the whole. Next, please. Yes. Let us start with the project concept and sites. That proposal is then the next step is submission to the Ministry of Environment and Climate Change. Then we have one thing. So what the impact has to study, and then the real environmental impact assessment exercise is carried out. Then the draft EIA report is prepared, which has to be followed up by a public consultation because it has to be participatory assessment approach. In participatory approach, the local denizens, the local public will have a say as what is their perception about the project in that area and how do they perceive the project coming up in their area. Both positive things and both negative, pros and cons, both has to be, and those concerns need to be accommodated in the draft EIA report, and the report need to be revised. That is what the revised report will be submitted to the decision-making authority. That is the Ministry of Environment, Forest and Climate Change in the center, and in the state, it is state level environment impact assessment authority. Next, please. This is how the organogram of institution involved in the EIA process. That is, I have discussed already. Center and state level organizations. Next, please. And how the whole clearance process, clearance mechanism. One of my dissertation student, she had undertaken this assignment as to prepare this, that how based on our existing clearance process, it's just a framework to say once the project proponent initiates the process of environmental impact assessment or initiates the process of getting the environment clearance, how the different steps, first thing is to you submit it. You have to first evaluate whether NOC is required or NOC is not required, clearance is required or clearance is not required. If clearance is required, then whether EIA is required or not required. If it is EIA is required, what scale of impact it is. It requires a rapid EIA or it requires a comprehensive EIA. Okay? And if it is, even if it is rapid EIA, what is the scale of activity the proposed project has? Does it need to be dealt at the state level or it has to be sent to the central level? Next, please. Now, the typical assessment, it basically revolves around the receptor. We basically on human beings and other receptors in the environment, the whole biological resources, human beings, wildlife, and so on. So you have flora, you have fauna, and you have cultural heritage, local culture, economy, and next is, so we cannot always focus only on the biological research, we have to focus on the non-biological resources also. Like we have geological landscapes, we have cultural landscape, and so on, right? And so what public thinks about? As a researcher, I think that EIA is very essential, but public thinks EIA is expensive. EIA delays the project. EIA slows down the economic development. And what is reality is lack of skilled human resource to prepare EIA. Any Tom and Jerry cannot just prepare EIA report. That is what has been happening for many years. And now since 2015, more or less Quality Council of India and National Accreditation Board for Education and Training, NABET, has taken up the task of, identifying skilled human resources available who can actually take up EIA projects, who can assist the technical expert teams in conducting robust EIA, robust environmental impact assessment exercises. So any one of you, after your course is over, after post-graduation, you are eligible to join as a EIA associate in any of the accredited agencies, environmental consultancy firms, or established labs. And after a few years of experience, you can also have a responsibility or role as a functional area expert that I will be discussing later. Next, please. Yes, it is all about EIA notification 2006. Basically a process of decentralizing the whole decision-making process, decentralizing the state government and the state level environmental impact assessment authority. Next, please. Yeah. Next. Yes. So what are all the projects they require EIA exercise? All the new project or activities, or there are projects which are already ongoing. That means in their case it is expansion and modernization. Right. Next, please. Even if you have any change in product mix, that also requires EIA. So category A, the decision maker is the government Ministry of Environment and Forest, and category B is the state level authority in category B, and there are again two different categories, category B1 and category B2. So category B1 are the project which require EIA, and category B2 does not require EIA. Next, please. So what are the applicability of areas? Are terrestrial habitats, coastal habitats, and marine habitats. Of course, these are the landscapes where projects are being proposed. Now, marine EIA is mandatory for projects which require direct waterfront areas. So in case of marine areas and development projects in marine areas, one needs to undertake an environmental impact assessment from the marine environmental perspective. So the procedure what we conduct for terrestrial ecosystem will be totally different than marine environmental EIA and marine ecosystems. And then the methodology also will change in its area. Now what happens in this case is there are two different regulations which are applicable. One is environmental impact assessment notification. The other one is coastal regulation zone notification. Because when a project is proposed in a coastal area, it is all the zonation is done. The whole of India's coastline is divided into specific zones, whether it is coastal regulation zone 1, 2, 3, and 4, depending on the ecological sensitivity, depending on the vulnerability of the area, and depending on the suitability of the area, and depending on already existing dependent community in those areas. Based on these factors, that 4 different zones are being made. whole of India's coastline. Next, please. Next. Yeah, next, please. Next. Yes. So what are coastal regulation zone 1 areas are basically the ecologically sensitive areas, right? And what are the ecologically sensitive area? Mangroves, coral and coral reefs, sand dunes, mudflats which are essentially biologically active. They are ecologically sensitive. Which are biologically not active, they are ecologically not sensitive. National park means all protected areas. National park, marine park, sanctuary, reserve forest, all that. So declared protected area notified under India's Wildlife Protection Act 1970. Saltmarsh ecosystem, turtle nesting grounds in Odisha. We have, there are several turtle nesting areas in Odisha, Gujarat, Maharashtra, Andhra Pradesh, Tamil Nadu, all those areas, and then mass nesting areas also. Horseshoe crab habitat for whole country. There is only one place in Odisha, that is Balasore, that is specifically for horseshoe crab habitats, seagrass bed, and so on. And additionally, intertidal zone, the area between highest high tide line and lowest low tide line. So that area is also coastal regulation zone 1. Next, coastal regulation zone 2. What is coastal regulation zone 2? The area which is developed or up to or very close to the shoreline. That means all municipal limits, existing municipal limits, and urban areas with all infrastructure facility like stormwater, drainage, industrial, and all that transportation facility. That is all CRZ2 areas. CRZ3 areas that are relatively undisturbed, and those which do not belong either to CRZ1 or CRZ2. They are all under CRZ3. What is CRZ4? CRZ4 is from lowest low tide line to 12 nautical miles on seaward side. Like we have many, onshore, offshore projects. So all the ONGC's petroleum oil drilling programs and, the single buoy moorings. If somebody is aware of Gujarat coast, there are many single buoy SBM facilities are available for shifting of oil to onshore. So in this case, up to 12 nautical mile from the lowest low tide line is considered CRZ4 area. And in case of estuarine ecosystem, that distance of the river from the mouth of the river up to the distance of the river where the salinity is up to 5 ppt, that is all CRZ4 area in case of estuarine zones. Next, please. And there are also areas which require special consideration, like Greater Mumbai, municipal limits of Greater Mumbai, CRZ areas in Kerala, including the backwaters and backward islands. Then Goa, CRZ areas in Goa, and then there is a special area that is called critically vulnerable coastal area. Like best example is Sundarban. So those areas are all coastal, considered under coastal. Yeah, next please. So what are the type of activities? Generally, our projects are planned. There are prohibited activities and there are permissible activities. For permissible activities, I had kept the hyperlink to the coastal regulation zone notification of Ministry of Environment and Forest. But since I have shared the slide with Dr. Sophia, she may not be able to click on that because the link is lost. So if it is required, I can send the PDF document which Dr. Sophia can perhaps share with all the participants in due course of time. Next, please. Yes. Yeah, we have discussed already. We have discussed. Next, please. Next. Yeah. So for every project in marine ecosystem, also in every project, we have to look at what are the critical areas around and what are the protected areas around, and what are the erosion potential in those areas, and whether they are notified eco-sensitive areas or not. So our perception is not going to help. We have to look at all the existing regulations and all the published notifications. Next, please. Next. Yeah, these are the project sectors that is notified by Quality Council of India in or NABET, National Accreditation Board for Education and Training, in their 2015 booklet. There are 40 different sectors are available. Here there are 24 sectors. Next, please. Next slide. Yeah, there are total 40 different sectors, which includes projects both on terrestrial side and both on marine side. Like you can have desalination plant, you can have port, you can have harbor, you can have jetty, you can have the ship breaking yard, ship construction yard, and so on. Oil and gas transportation pipeline, oil drilling wells. Yeah, next please. Then comes functional areas. So these are the functional areas usually for any complete EIA team. These functional area experts are required. That's what I precisely said, that once you are out of the department after completing your degree, you can perhaps assess yourself as which of the functional area you as best fit. So you can apply to specific agencies and get yourself absorbed. So this is avenue. This is the avenue for livelihood, earning livelihood as job placement, as well as to learn more techniques on EIS. So you can get yourself into any of the functional areas, 12 different functional area that has been identified. Next, please. What are the geographical areas we consider usually? It is air quality, water quality, vegetation, wildlife, fishery, and historic areas of historical significance, recreational values, social cultural significance, and so on. And this helps us in identifying what sort of parameters we should keep in our mind or carrying out an EIA project. Next, please. How do you do it? The exercise starts with, you are gathering the topo map, making a reconnaissance of the particular area, and you are planning what sort of data need to be generated and data need to be collected. So field data, physical, biological, socio-economical, and all sorts of things. Next, please. And then once you collect the sample, you need to know what all sort of parameter you have to analyze in the laboratory. And the parameter what you fix for terrestrial projects in terrestrial location will be different than the parameters what you decide for projects in marine locations. Okay? Yeah. So what are the source of data that you also have to identify? You can first make a thorough review of literature and identify the data sources, whether you are collecting the existing data from government departments or available literature from academic reports, dissertations, theses, and research papers, and data available in like State Pollution Control Board and Central Pollution Control Board reports, and you will have to compile them. Especially, that will help you in setting up your strategy for primary data collection. So because the data what you are collecting, secondary data, will provide you a framework for what has been the environmental scenario in that particular site for last 10 years or 12 years or 15 years or 20 years. That will help you in setting up the strategy for the next 1 year, where we will be doing the comprehensive environmental assessment, how we will actually EIA exercise. And data can be presented in specific forms, tabular forms, graphical forms, and so on. Next. Yeah. Yes, you have to actually check one thing. This is actually a sand dune. Sand dune is one of the environmentally eco-sensitive habitats, ecologically critical habitat, and this is near Gopalpur on sea, very close to our university, very close to Barampur city also. These natural sand dunes are available in many states, many coastal states in the country, and without realizing the importance of such critical habitats, we usually end up many different developmental projects, clear the landscape, and come up with housing projects and so on. Now we have to look at as what project we have planned. Really, the site is really suitable, or can we suggest an alternative site? For example, in a project plan along a coast where there is extensive, good, mature sand dunes are available. So a project agency, development agency is thinking that to clear the sand, construct the building. We actually being a resourceful, practicing EIA professionals, we should see that kind of housing project can also come up in a normal terrestrial area. So instead of clearing up the sand dune, we can actually suggest them shift the project to another area. Instead of saying that the project should not come up, we can say that you shift the location. That is the whole concept of site alternative. So what happens? And should describe the ecological importance of sand dunes. So being students of marine sciences, you must have to be sure as what are the ecological importance of sand dunes, how sand dunes have been historically or geologically effective in curtailing the impacts of natural disasters in coastal villages, in coastal areas. Sorry. Next, please. Next. Yeah. And then once your data collection is over, perhaps you will have to go for checking how the data has been suitable and reliable, whether it is adequate or accurate and representativeness. If it is not so, you will have to have a revised strategy for further data collection. Next, please. Go to the previous slide. Go to the previous slide. See how ill-informed decision damages an ecosystem. This is a casuarina plantation in some part of the coastal area in our country. I will not say the location, but this casuarina plantation has been come up on a mature sand. First picture is sand dune from Odisha, and this is a picture of a sand dune from somewhere in one of the coastal states. But without having a second thought, without having enough visionary thoughts, the concerned department has gone ahead with plantation of casuarina, thinking that it will arrest, it will check, prevent the coastal villages from effects of the disaster. But what has happened? We have lost the sand dune now. So that has become a flat land with all the casuarina plantation. So you need to understand the ecological values of specific habitats which is seen in the particular area where the project is proposed. Next, please. Yeah. So once you are collecting secondary data, you will be checking the legibility, completeness, and consistency. And something that you must be aware of is data outlier. So extreme values need to be carefully omitted while collecting data because there can be those are accidental observations. Next, please. Yeah. So what we do is, it is basically a system of computerized data storage and identifying the extreme values. You are producing different measures of central tendency so that it is easy to understand and recognize the trends in a spatio-temporal scale. So over the space and time. Now what you have to do here is, in addition to this, you have to go for certain prediction. For example, you are going for a oil ship breaking yard or ship building yard. And an EIA has to be carried out. You also have to predict that in future there might be oil spillage. There might be leakage of oil in that particular marine environment. So in that case, you have to go for appropriate models at how many tidal cycles can be adequate enough, to disperse the oil that will be likely to be spilled off during any sort of asphyxiation in that particular area. Such kind of prediction also you will have to make. And there are many standard methodologies available because as I have told you today, I am only going to talk about a general EIA process, not about specific technical aspects. So if somebody is interested, we can always, again discuss it out. Next, please. That is all about predictions. So another type of prediction can be a highly, like a petroleum refinery, which is proposed along a coastal area. The air dispersion of pollutants to be emitted from that particular refinery has to be predicted properly through different dispersion modeling exercises. Air pollution dispersion models are available for specific area type source, line type source, and regional level models. Next, please. So that is some of the specific graphical forms which can be like line diagram, histograms, and all that. That is easy for comprehension by the decision maker. So once you are preparing an EIA report, one is a detailed project, project details, the objective and scope of the study, and the pre-project scenario, data analysis, because you might have collected secondary data for 10 to 12 years prior to the project implementation. So you have a pre-project scenario, you have a project hedge during construction, and then you have a prediction what is going to have during operational phase. So you have to also identify the salient findings on baseline characteristics that a decision maker is able to understand while reviewing the report, and ultimately the cost benefit analysis. So your environmental cost and environmental benefits to be weighed properly. Like you are proposing a project on the marine area, you also have to look at whether that is a historically fish landing center. If it is a fish landing center and one industry is proposed along that area, what sort of impact the industry is going to have, or the effluents, what is being going to be released in the sea, what sort of effect it is going to have on the fish breeding, fish spawning, and the productivity. If there is a lot of mud flat, whether it is going to be the active, biologically active mud flat is going to be affected. If it is going to be affected, as to what extent. So this is the kind of prediction one has to have depending on the specific location issues. Next, please. And when you are making a habitat corridor specific management plan, it has to be realistic, and you have to keep all the scenarios in mind, pre-project, existing ground scenario, and post-project scenario, and always refer the recent IUCN assessment. So for many of the marine organisms, anyway, we know a very meager fraction of marine organisms have been described scientifically so far. A major proportion of marine organisms are yet to be described and explored, which Dr. Sophia can tell in a better way to all of you, she being a marine biologist. And IUCN assessment always keeps on talking about the threat status of a particular organism which is seen in any area. So in the proposed area, whatever organisms are available, we can always take the IUCN assessment criteria and accordingly prepare the management plan. And the better way to do is preparing a cumulative impact assessment and carrying capacity analysis for that particular area. If there are already existing projects going on, and the project you are carrying out is another addition. If it is a virgin area with a very pristine landscape, no projects are operational, then it is good. It is quite easier for you to predict the impact. If it is an area where it is already developed and another project is coming up, then you have to go for a cumulative impact assessment. I think in general brief, some of the specific points of EIA we have touched upon, and one thing which we have to keep in mind is the compensatory environmental values. If a project is coming up over a mudflat, how much of mudflat it is going to, that is what I have mentioned, compromised areas, compromised or restored. So how much mudflat area it is going to take over, or how much of mangrove area it is going to clear off. So there has to be an alternative compensation process as to develop similar stretch of mangrove patches, if not in that place, in another place in the country. So that has to be there. That mechanism has to be there in your environmental management plan. It has to be very specific. Yeah, I think that is all about very general components of EIA and how we try to manage. This is perhaps one of the widest maximum an intertidal belt with maximum width intertidal zone in Maharashtra, one of the places in Maharashtra. Yeah. So that is what, on very brief, I had something to discuss and share with all of you. And I'm really sorry for the technical glitch we faced here, because it is quite a remote area. And the network is very feeble, not that strong. I hope it was audible to all of you. And yeah, we can discuss it out if there is any time left for discussion.
Yes, sir. Thank you, sir.
Yes, Dipti, if you have any query, then you can ask.
Yes,
first.
sir. First of all, sir, good afternoon. And thank you for such a nice explanation over EIA. I I wanted to know, like, we do every project which starts at first has to do EIA, right? But uh, we know that there are many projects that has that still happen. Like one happened with. This is someone's mic is on.
I can hear some background noise. Is somebody?
Not from my side, sir. Sir, so I was like the project, the hydropower project, for example, in Uttarakhand, which was now we can say that glacier burst and everything went up. So there is this other thing that goes on, that the project was initially by the near people, by the local people and all that's environmentalists. They told them that the project should not be carry forward because it's not good for the environment and all sorts of stuff. And even there are other cases in all the mountain regions of like Himalayas, Himachal Pradesh, there where they have created dams or hydro projects which have been taken. These projects are also destroying the environment, but still it is there in realistic view. So how they pass EIA if EIA is such a basic thing to pass in the Ministry, Forest of Wildlife Ministry. Their voice is not audible.
Sir, your voice is not audible.
Actually, I think even I'm in a remote area, so we are facing Microsoft crash. So even my does crash and we have to rejoin.
So I think again some problem will be there. So we will wait for 1 minute. So sir will be joining.
I'm also facing some issue with this Microsoft team today. It's closing again and again.
Yes, sir.
Yes, there is some issue with Microsoft Team only.
Yeah.
It is crashing every time.
Yeah.
After every 20 minutes. Crash.
My mic is also on. Okay. So I think we will. Yes.
I think sir is in
Yes.
lobby.
Yes, I'm admitting.
Hello.
Yes, sir. Yes, sir. You are audible.
Yes, sir.
Yes, sir. Now you are audible.
Hello.
Yes.
Am I audible?
Yes, sir.
Yes, sir.
Yeah. Is it network issue or a Microsoft Team issue?
So there
I'm
is
not
a
able to
Microsoft Team
understand.
issue.
Anyway,
It is Microsoft Team issue, sir.
we are having regular meetings over Google Meet. We never had this type of issues, internet
I think
connectivity. But I'm really surprised.
I think today Microsoft Team is having some issue because even we are having all the online classes and everything on Team only, but
Okay.
something
Okay.
is wrong today.
Okay. Okay. No issue. Maybe it's yeah, out of our control. Yeah. Anybody? Somebody was asking something.
Yes, sir. Yes, sir. It's me, Deepthi. Sir,
Yeah.
first of all, thank you for the very nice presentation over EIA, and it was really great to hear so much about. And there were lots of things that I didn't knew before, and it has created one whole curiosity to know more kind of state right now. My question was that we have so many projects in India that are going on, And as you say that it is necessary for every new project or ongoing project to pass on this EIA. So but we have projects like hydropower projects that is in Uttarakhand, which recently got destroyed because of the glacier burst. And people reported that local, before the project was starting, even the people reported that, this will not be environment friendly to us, it will harm everything, and all that stuff was going on. But still the project was working, the projects the project was there. So like, if EI is like, how is like in the reality, how like we don't see this reality versus expectations versus reality kind of a situation, where we think that every project has to pass certain criterias. But in reality, if even they say that, it will be environment friendly, or the project is going to help you or bring economy and all that stuff, but some or the other way, it does impacts the environment in the negative corner. And how is it possible to, I don't know. And even the one more query, like even like the colleges, or it's just a small observation that I have. The colleges that deals with science research institutes, or say normal colleges that deals with science education, that have the labs and all that stuff. In normal scenario, every even have a chemistry lab. A small chemistry lab will be the basic lab, and there will be chemicals and all that stuff. In MIT, we have proper sanitization of the chemicals or something like that, which is said. But in government institutes or something like that, if you go ground level, they will throw that there all the chemicals drainage system will go into the sewage, which will directly and indirectly go in rivers. Or there are places which I won't say, but their chemicals are going also in their backwaters areas or something like that. So how can as a students, how can we report, or we deal with these things where we see that, solid waste management is not there, even being in the educational area, or having saying that this is an educational institute, one, but the solid waste management there itself is not that great. So how to deal with that part also? I don't know.
Okay. These two major aspects, Dipti.
Yes, sir, yes, sir, yes, sir.
Yes. So first one, let us discuss about the hydropower projects. Whatever recent episodes you have experienced, that is really unfortunate. So one thing what we discussed is environmental impact assessment exercise basically helps us in providing guidelines, describing a minimum threshold level of impact will be permitted, and how much impact can be there in future when the project is in full scale operational. One. Second,
Yes.
when we talk about these hydropower projects, there is something called one of the slide I have discussed about carrying capacity, analysis. So that is little technical and more modeling aspect. So I discuss about that. That essentially deals with the for a particular region, as how many such projects can be accommodated. When you talk about hydropower projects, it is basically to do
Yes,
with
sir.
availability of water and the flow of water. What is otherwise called as the normal flow through an annual hydrograph, what we measure. Now, I have been part of some of the projects which was aimed at carrying capacity analysis of some of the river system across the country. So we always say that we need to evaluate the E-flow first. E-flow is ecosystem flow or ecological flow, the minimum
Yes,
flow
sir.
pattern river ecosystem for sustaining the riverine ecology, for sustaining the aquatic biological resources which are surviving or thriving in a particular river. So just because there is a heavy flow, we cannot go ahead with construction of various hydroelectric projects. So there has to be a threshold distance to be estimated. Maybe depending on this flow, maybe 50 kilometer or 70 kilometer or 100 kilometer. So if we have a hydropower project here at a location A, the next location for the next hydroelectric power should be after 100 kilometer downstream or 200 kilometer downstream or so on. And you also have to look at the surrounding ecological sensitive areas. That is one thing. Second thing. Third thing, it's a vicious cycle. We as a general, if I keep my avatar of researcher in EIA aside, if I become a normal human being
Yes, sir.
who is surviving society, I will think that this EIA is nothing. It doesn't help. But practically, you think it is basically a vicious cycle. Right? There is no, and see what Mahatma Gandhi has said once. The nature has capacity to support everyone's need, but not everyone's greed. Right now, we have no limit for our greed. We need resources. We really live in a very we live a resource intensive lifestyle. So where does the resource come from? Right? Where does the resource come from? Everybody talks about don't go for mining. I'm not saying that mining doesn't have environmental impact. Everyone says that don't go for mining. But every time, even we have a pressure cooker in our home, 5 liter, still we feel that, अरे और एक लेते हैं ना 3 liter वाला, variety बढ़ेगा.
Yes,
We
sir.
go ahead with buying another pressure cooker. So where that aluminium comes from? It is from bauxite. And if that pressure increases for the faulty usage or undesired usage by human being, definitely that has to lead to different exploration of raw material. It is where we talk about EIA. So EIA team actually can prescribe it. So decision makers has to take a decision. And decision makers are always, I know because many of my senior colleagues are in this committee, some of the committee I have also visited as part of there was a committee set up by Madras High Court. We have visited many areas in Tamil Nadu to assess the impact of dyeing and bleaching industries on many areas in the outskirts of Coimbatore. Now, it is a very difficult task.
Yes,
I mean, what do you catch? Like, that's what I said. It's a vicious cycle. Like in that case, let us not go for having more hydroelectric power projects. But can we really survive in an era
without
where a very modest lifestyle was practiced? Can we really live with a very modest lifestyle? That is perhaps the need of the hour. That is what comes with the framework of environmental ethics. In our course also, we keep one component as environmental ethics. We talk everything technical, but also the ethical part has to be, ingrained in our mind. Third thing, coming to the laboratory aspect, there is something called NABL, National Accreditation Board for Laboratory, which has set aside prescribed specific guidelines as how to manage laboratory waste which is generated from laboratories. So any laboratory, like now Ministry and Quality Council of India has made it mandatory that an EIA team who goes ahead with collection of environmental samples and starts primary data generation, that laboratory has to be NABL approved laboratory. If it is NABL approved laboratory, all your lab waste, the hazardous waste need to be sent to hazardous waste treatment site, TSDF. So some kind of streamlining is being made. Yes, said and done, we have discussed enough, but I can very well say, being a practitioner in the field, we cannot achieve all the prescribed thing in a very short span of 5 years or 10 years. Something which we have not practiced, like European standard, we are not practicing in India. It will take time, but it is happening. So after 2015, when the Quality Council of India and NABED guideline came into picture, I myself was heading the EIA team in Gujarat Institute of Desert Ecology. We have been subjected to a lot of screening, lot of documentary evidence, and we have to make so many, it is completely facelifting and bring out a paradigm shift in your practice. You are doing.
so your voice is not audible.
Hello?
Yes, now it is audible, sir.
Yeah, the way you do sampling, suppose you are going for a sampling during high tide and sampling during low tide. You are collecting a sample during a SBM, single buoy mooring site. You are collecting sample in subtidal zone and in intertidal zone. There are specific methodologies. There are specific instruments. Earlier, people used to just take a bottle, dip the bottle, and they say that it is direct dipping method. No. ये नहीं चलेगा. Direct dipping method It was maybe a concept before 50 years or 30 years or 50 years. Now, for quality purpose, at least direct dipping method, it cannot be acceptable. So there are augmentation, there are improvisation being done, but yeah, it will take time, and we all of us has to cooperate with it. All of us to create more awareness. I think
So,
maybe I
sir,
could address some of your concerns. I'm not sure.
yes, so it's just like EIA is like consultancy where you can tell people like this is wrong or this is right or what is the right way to do. But you can't. If I'm understanding it right, but we can't control the organization. Is that so? Like,
Uh, yes, it, I'll clarify. First thing, just set off the concept that EIA is a consultancy work. It is not. Perhaps you will find in Google there are many universities in Europe and US where due academic credit is given to the subject called EIA. In India, we are yet to come up to that academic standard. However, it is not a consultancy work. A team who carries out an EIA has to be compensated appropriately monetarily for the time they are spending for the work. So let us technically, understand in this way. However, I have said one point. The major challenge is lack of trained human resource in the field. Now, after the Quality Council of India guideline came into picture, many research institutes have started having their EIA lab or EIA team. So I was in a research institute, so we have had our EIA team. So that was not a consultancy firm. That was a research institute. But then we had our own, thought process that when we are technically robust, technically sound, and infrastructure-wise we are well established, why can't we contribute for the sustainable management of ecological resources, sustainable management of ecological habitats in the form of carrying out EIA projects, in the form of prescribing the what is to be done, what is required for a proper management of the project, as well as the surrounding denizens, local denizens, and maintaining and the conservation part. Yes, it is consultancy because there are many consulting organizations which they have started, so they call it as a consultancy firm. But outside country, if you go to Europe and US, it is a purely academic subject. It's an academic subject.
This is the basically subject where you can discuss and deliberate continuously for long hours, and 1 hour you will not be able to understand this concept and to have it in your activities. Basically, it's AIA is a activity which is not the responsibility of an institution. It is a responsibility of an individual, basically. So you need to think that how your activities are going to impact the environment, and that will resolve a lot of issues. So Dr. Prousty, I am very thankful, and the type of question students are asking, that shows that how much they are interested in this topic and how much they learn from you. I will request you that Dr. Sophia please coordinate one more time with Dr. Prousty, and he can elaborate more on the job aspects. If somebody want to make career in this field, because he himself is a practitioner, so he can guide our student if somebody is interested to make career in this field, how they can make their career in this field. So I will request you, if you can make one more session with our student, that will be very useful for you. So thank you so much, Dr. Prousty. Over to you, Dr. Sophia.
Thank you, sir, for giving us time. So I think many students have many questions, but we are just restricting here them. So, and also I am thankful to sir that with one mail only he given the time from his busy schedule. So he is heading a institute, and now there are lots of meetings are going on, like this is the financial year ending and all those things. So academic work is also there. So also from that busy schedule, he given me time and given us time actually to AIMST. So I'm really thankful from all the students, from the each and every member of AIMST. I'm thankful to sir. So thank you, sir, for your sparing time for us. So thank you, sir. So we are also looking forward for many collaborations, like we are talking about the projects and all. So we will looking forward for that only. So we'll again talk to you, sir.
Yes.
Okay.
Yeah.
Thank you so much.
Thank you so much, Dr.
Thank you,
Srivastava, and
sir.
yeah, namaskar. And it was, yeah, I'm really sorry for the technical glitch we had due to network issues and all that in
Not
this
at all. Not
distant
at all.
corner
That
of the country.
technical issue is
Uh,
from Microsoft Teams.
I really feel envious of both of you that you are sitting in NCR.